When should you hire somebody or bring somebody on? We only hire when there's a constraint, okay? So like when there's something that's bottlenecking you for growth, that's when you're gonna wanna hire, all right? And you don't have to hire full-time to start off with. Whatever the laws of your land are, follow those, but your state, whatever. But you don't necessarily need to hire for full-time. You could start off with hiring for a few days a week or a day or a weekend, like something like that. You could start hiring for in order to get some of your time back. That's going to be a crucial piece, is being able to do that. If you would have told me that 15, 18 years ago, I'd be like, I'm just trying to get to 100 students. I don't know about any of that stuff. But my point is that as you continue to grow to these next levels, you've got to let your vision expand as well. And as long as the people that you're working with underneath your vision, their opportunities can expand, they will stick with you. Okay. This is where we've had issues in the past of not casting vision far enough for our team members. And what's happened, unfortunately, is that people got to a certain point and then they quit. And they went and they took other jobs. We're talking about staffing, and one of the first things that I want to discuss is student numbers and the vanity metrics of student count. So I'm just going to say that's a vanity metric, and I would recommend that you have a mindset shift around this, because when we were so wrapped up in the amount of students that we had, we were the least profitable that we'd ever been with the highest amount of students that we'd ever had. So I'm going to say that again. So we got up to about 650 students at one location at our flagship school, and we were still doing the same amount of revenue that we're doing right now. Actually, we're doing less revenue than what we're doing right now. For context, last year we finished with 1.3 million inside the flagship school for the year. And so we had 400 to 450 students versus 650 students. Now, what sounds better? Well, 450 students versus 650. Oh my gosh, 650. I want a 650 student school. No, you don't. Not unless you have really cheap rent and really cheap labor, which is usually not a thing that you're going to have, at least in the United States or United Kingdom or Australia. You're not going to have those things. And so let me just tell you that a thing that's more important as a business owner, and I realize that some of you guys are on this call may not be business owners, but I'm going to tell you the other side of this, why this should be important to you as well, is as a business owner, profitability of the business is more important than the number of people that you serve. And it will always be more important than the number of people you serve. The only time that number actually is like makes you feel good is when you're doing something which Mr. Seeler probably has talked to you guys about in the past, which is the comparison gap. When you're comparing someone else to yourself, or you're vice versa, you're comparing yourself to them. Like, if this is why when I do talk with clients and we ask, okay, how many students do you currently have? That's an important number to know, but only in comparison to the amount of revenue that they're generating, the amount of revenue that they're bringing in. And then underneath that, the amount of profit that they're actually getting. So if you're comparing 650 students versus 450 students, 400 students, somewhere around there, let me tell you all the things that were not in our favor. At that number, we had 35 team members that were working for us inside the karate school at one time. Out of those 35, I would say about 8 to 10 were full-time people. So let's just say 10. And then that meant that the other 25 were part-time teenagers that were coming in and helping out with classes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if you ever taught a class, just a class of teenagers, you realize how much effort and energy goes into making sure they perform at their highest level for a 1-hour class. Imagine trying to have that same level of effort with 25 of them every week that were not responsible for themselves, but were responsible for the performance of others. That was exponentially hard. So the admin that went on top of those 25 was really challenging and difficult, right? The other thing, space, right? So you get to this point where you're like, I gotta have more space. I gotta have more space. I gotta have more space. So what happens is you sign a lease for more space because that's what you need, but you might have ups and downs. And so your student count might go down and you might not need that space. At that time, we also weren't really fully doing rostered classes. Like, we would have people come in, but they could switch their schedule all the time. So like, you choose your schedule. Let's say you're doing Monday, Wednesday, but if you want to change your schedule later, that's fine. And then they wouldn't tell us, and then they would just come whenever they wanted to. And maybe once every 2 or 3 months, we might do an audit and be like, hey, you guys are coming to the classes. Like, why have you been coming to these classes? And what was happening is we would follow the trends of the student body to staff the classes. And so sometimes we would have 10 or 15 teenagers that were there to work, but we only needed 3 for one class, but the next class was going to be big. So we had to pay 15 because what were we going to do? Send them home for an hour and then tell them to come back? Can't do that. Most of them didn't have vehicles. Go sit down outside. Like it just wasn't working. So I'm trying to tell all of you guys this because out of all those lessons that we learned them the really hard way. And we've learned them from the ground up. So from, not having any students to having 650 students to having a comfortable 400 to 450 and jamming and getting in the revenue and having profit and being able to share that profit with team members, being able to commission people, being able to pay full-time team members properly, and being able to have this culture that we just love being at every single day. And that's what I would want for you guys. So how do you build that? How do you actually make that happen? That's what we're going to talk about next. So the first thing is you have to have your vision of what your perfect school looks like. And your vision will change over time as well. Okay, so I want you to think right now, when it comes down to how many students you want, I want you to think not in terms of how many students you want, but I want you to think in terms of how much money do you want to take home? Like seriously, like you need to think about how much money do you want to take home? Now, if you're not an owner right now, you're like, well, that's not up to me. It kind of is. So let me just give you an example here. So if you go and you're not an owner and you're like, I want to take home X amount of dollars every month, you have to realize that if you're taking home X amount of dollars every single month, then the revenue of the school somewhere has to be 4 to 6 times probably what you're taking home, depending upon your position. That's what it's going to have to be because there's other people, there's expenses, there's other things. So if you want your revenue to increase that you're bringing in, your personal income, then the business revenue has to go up as well. So they go hand in hand. So first of all, this is an interactive class. You're not answering this out loud, but you are writing this down somewhere. I want you to just write down a number, and it doesn't matter if it's correct or not correct, and it could just be double what you're currently bringing in. I don't really care. We're going through the exercise so we can help work through it in our heads, because what's more important is that you don't just listen to what I'm saying, but you do something about what I'm saying today. So just want you to write down right now, like what that number would be. Like, what do you want to bring in personally every single month? And then next to that number, the thing that I want you to do next is I want you to write down why. I find that for me personally, if I were to say, I want to bring in a certain amount of, revenue, there's 2 things that really motivate me. So one is, I'll have where it's a game and I'm just trying to achieve the game, and to win the game. So like, could I possibly do this? Like, there's a lot of things I do. It's like, well, could I possibly do this? Yes, I did it. And it's just this game that I play for myself internally because I like the game of business, but not everybody's motivated that way. And I also will say it will only get you so far. My why, I'll just be honest, because my mom is directly related to my kid and my kid's future. Like, that's my why. I'll just say that. It's related to the legacy of my family because I am thinking further along. So, I'm thinking 20, 25 years down the road, and I'm thinking generationally. For me, that because of my faith, because of what I believe as a Christian, because of my family dynamics, I believe that it's part of my responsibility to be able to provide for not just the next generation, but 2 generations, 3 generations from now. And in order to do that, my why is like really big. Like, I need to make sure that I'm doing all that. So I feel that internally. It internally motivates me. If I have this number now and I have this internal motivation next to it, the next logical question that comes up is how. We're normally like, okay, I see this number here, but how do I get it? And what I would encourage you guys to do is exchange the word for how to who. Okay? Because typically if you have a number that's so big that you start squirming in your seat because it's big and you're like, I don't know if I can do it. It's because you're only thinking about how only you are going to do it. And you're not thinking about who you would need on your team to help you accomplish that goal. And if you have the right who, then your how becomes much easier. And for a lot of you guys, you're, for example, you're in our program. So we're handling a piece of marketing for you. Maybe we're handling, setting your appointments for you and all of that. Maybe you're who when it comes to knowledge base because you don't have that knowledge, right? So like, we're the who for you in that area. And we can't physically be the boots on the ground and the who to help you do some of these other tasks that you have going on that are going to be possible or going to be probable that you're going to need to do. But you've got to look at all these other areas. So if I said, okay, look at your revenue number right now, what would you perceive to be the bottleneck for achieving that revenue number in regards to some type of task or some type of organizational missing piece that you have in your company? So, I mean, I'll just say this, our vision right now, like, our vision for a 7-year dojo, we want to continuously 10x. So, we have about 100 clients currently. So if we were to X that, I mean, that's 1,000 clients, right? How do I, as an owner, keep the quality, right? How do I keep the strategic impact of this business for all of our clients? If I start thinking in terms of how, I'll never get anywhere. You see what I'm saying? So like if you right now, I'm going to give a number. So let's say you have, we'll go with your number, Mr. Caleb, so 56 students. If I told you, I want you to 10x that, you need to be at 550 students, 560 students. You would have to have some other things in place to be able to get to 560 students than what you currently have right now. And you probably are thinking about a who, maybe somebody that is going to have to come alongside you. Likewise, let's say that your school is doing, just anybody's school, I'm not picking Mr. Caleb, but let's just say somebody's school is doing $10,000 a month. If I said I want you to 10x that, I want you to do $100,000 a month, then what's the who? Who's the who? What are the who's that you're going to need? I feel like I'm starting to sound like a Dr. Seuss book. But anyway, like you need to have somebody that's going to come in and be that who for you, that person that's going to come along. And we have to start thinking about in terms of bringing on additional people so that we can grow our business. Because if our vision is not big enough for other people to fit underneath our vision and then they still have room to expand, you won't keep them. Okay. The reason why my team that I currently have inside of my flagship dojo, the reason why they're still there and they're like jamming as a core team is because part of that team shares some of the profit that our martial arts school generates. We actually profit share with some of the team members. Some of them earn commissions based off of sales. Other people are business partners in other businesses that we have. So they're tied in that area. Now, if you would have told me 10 years ago that we were going to have people profit sharing and that we were also going to be having people in other businesses, I'd be like, I could maybe see that. If you would have told me that 15, 18 years ago, I'd be like, I'm just trying to get to 100 students. I don't know about any of that stuff. But my point is that as you continue to grow to these next levels, you've got to let your vision expand as well. And as long as the people that you're working with underneath your vision, their opportunities can expand, they will stick with you. Okay. This is where we've had issues in the past of not casting vision far enough for our team members. And what's happened, unfortunately, is that people got to a certain point and then they quit. And they went and they took other jobs. They were like, you're doing what for a living? Like, you're going and you're doing like laying pipe right now for a living instead of teaching martial arts classes? Like, surely teaching martial arts classes is a lot better than laying pipe in the ground, But it was like, I can make more money. I can do this. Okay, so was it the money that was holding them back? Potentially, it could have been. And you're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. But I also think that it was just overall vision that was limiting them. So when it comes to thinking about who do you need, if you reverse engineer, it's a lot easier to get there. So think about your long-term goal, okay? Or maybe your owner's long-term goal. And it's easy to think in terms of revenue or in terms of student count. I understand that. If you take, 200 students times whatever you're charging right now, that's an easy one. 200 students times whatever you're charging right now. Okay. And if you put that in and you go, that's the amount of revenue that I need. And I'm just using 200. Maybe your number's 300. Maybe it's 400. Maybe it is 600. I don't know what your number is. But you put that in times whatever your monthly revenue is, that's just going to be a small portion, but you could use that as a base. You could say, okay, then that's going to bring in 60,000 a month. That's going to bring in 80,000 a month. That's going to bring in 90,000, whatever it is. And then I want you to think about, who do you see besides yourself, if you're an owner, that's going to be an operator, somebody who's going to be managing all of that? And if you don't know who that person is right now in your team, then I want you to write, you could say operator, you could say manager, and I want you to write a question mark. So if you have room on your sheet of paper, like you just want to make a diagram, like you're going to be at the top as owner, and then underneath that, you're going to want to have a spot that's operator or manager. They can be used interchangeably. Ultimately, here's the difference. So like my operator, my chief of operations, her name is Lisa Corley. She takes the vision that I give as the CEO and she makes it happen. So I don't have to schedule people. Like I don't have to schedule any staff members to be at a certain thing. So remember the Ninja Turtle event that I said like, hey, we were at a Ninja Turtle event, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like I just said, let's do a Ninja Turtle booth. And because we've done stuff like this in the past, she just leaned back on the standard operating procedures that we already had in place. She scheduled everybody for the booth. She coordinated who was going to be in charge of checking in on the leads and making sure that the lead flow was good. She coordinated the supplies and she made it happen. And I didn't do anything. Like I did nothing with it. I'll be honest. I did absolutely nothing with it. The only thing I did with it was, hey, there's a Ninja Turtle movie. We should be at this thing. And eventually, as an owner, that would be a place that you would want to be because you're going to be the most creative in that space. Okay. You're going to have the most amount of bandwidth for you personally to operate in your zone of genius.